The Poorly Made is a book of short stories that are all strung together because they all take place in the same cursed upstate New York county called Renfield County. It's sort of like a creepy Hudson Valley, if anyone's been to the Hudson Valley. I say it's like a creepy Hudson Valley. The Hudson Valley is already creepy, but this place is even creepier. Um, the frame narrative for this short story collection is a series of emails where this woman is trying to figure out what happened to her mom. And she's trying to send these emails to her brother over the course of a single evening. And her brother isn't responding. And as you go through the book and you get each interstitial chapter, you can see that the timestamps are getting closer and closer to now. So we're building to some event or breakthrough or cataclysm or catharsis or something as the stories get creepier and creepier. And so it's a great way to learn a little bit more about the lore of the world that I introduced in Edenville and will continue to build on in my next novel, Galloway's Gospel, which, by the way, you can read them any order. You can read Poorly Made first. You can read Edenville first. Heck, you can wait until Galloway's Gospel comes out and you can read that first. A lot of the characters and locations overlap, so there are Easter eggs that you'll only get if you read all three of them. Uh, but that is the Poorly Made. It's a book full of cannibals, spooky tree beasts, aliens, all kinds of fun stuff. So if you're feeling lonely and it's late at night, check out the Poorly Made and other things.
I wanted to start this conversation specifically because you've been on my radar since Edenville came out, and I'd heard you on podcasts talking about that, and I was like, oh man, I need to read that. And we talked off air. The number of amazing books that exist in the world just made it so I didn't have the opportunity to. But when we did our horror preview for for the first half of 2025, Becky Spradford mentioned the Poorly Made and raved, and she even kind of like wagged a finger at publishers because she kind of acknowledged that book was written before Edenville or was ready or whatever it is. And but they kind of nudged you to do the novel first, and
Yeah.
she felt like doing the story collection first and then leading into the novel. I just hit my microphone. I've been doing this for like 13 years and I still hit my microphone. Leading into Edenville, she thought made total sense, and it seemed like that was kind of your original um, um, kind of that was the original kind of path.
Yeah.
And so we'll talk about that, but I just wanted to start out by saying, like, Becky Spradford raving about your book is like kind of cool because she's very honest and she will give it to you how it is. And so that my excitement for reading it was there because I'm like, ooh, I'm not going to miss another Sam Rebelein book. But when she just gushed about it, I was like, this has got to be something special.
Yeah, that was really cool. I was really blown away by because I listened to that episode and I was especially pleased with her sort of finger wagging. Not to like poo poo the publisher or anything, but that is certainly how there was a lot in Edenville that I had to sort of retro engineer into the novel that I felt like I had introduced in the short story collection. That then I was like, okay, well now I'm introducing all these story elements that are important for the novel, but also these world elements that I felt like I was kind of. I mean, shoehorn is a strong word, but it was definitely a struggle to figure out how to get it all in there in a way that felt satisfying to me. And then there was a bigger storyline that I was trying to set up for the cosmic worm creature, because I wanted to. I wanted it to be sort of the seed of two different worlds. So it was a lot that I crammed into Edenville, and that was kind of the conversation that I got to have for about a year and a half with that book. Was like, this book is insane, and like there's a lot happening, and I felt like the Poorly Made represented what I wanted to say about Renfield County specifically so much more cleanly.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was kind of awkward to have some of those conversations because I was like, talking about Renfield County as this metaphorical like depression on the face of the earth, and it came from this very cathartic place for me. But the only thing I had to show for that was this like bonkers cosmic horror adventure, and so I was really happy when Poorly Made was starting to get out into the world to talk about the landscape as like fully as I had been thinking about
Yeah.
it for years and years. I'm not like, I don't mean any of that to say I'm like displeased with the way things have shaken out, because it's all, happening smoothly. But it certainly is gratifying to have the picture be a little bit more complete. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, well, in anything where you have a not necessarily a plan, but like kind of an idea of it's this, then this, then this. So you
Mm-hmm.
do the work so that this, then this, then this works
Mm-hmm.
to have things moved around. Then you have to like scramble and yeah, it can be
Yeah.
it can feel frustrating even if. So I'll give the example of, and I'm not calling out Stephen King, but I worked on that Scare Up the Vote stream with
Oh yeah.
Keanu Reeves do. And
Yeah.
so I was like one of the people in the background, kind of like working the tech. And Stephen was having technical issues that anybody could have.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying anything negative about Stephen King. He was having technical issues, and we were on a strict timeline of this person, this person, this person.
Yeah.
And like at the last minute, we just kind of like shuffled everybody around and bumped someone up and everything. And for anybody, watching, it seemed, like there was no issue. There was like, it seemed like how it was supposed to be.
Yeah.
But behind the scenes, we're scrambling and we're like, can we do this? What's going on? Who's the? And so
Yeah.
it was a little bit of that duck's feet under the water kind of metaphor or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, like anytime you have to change up the plan, it's gonna feel challenging, even if it's not bad. Even if everything works out, you're still gonna be like, oh man, that was some work.
Well, and I feel that way about pretty much every part of the process, where I'm just like, especially now in the last like month where we're all sort of sliding into the abyss, I feel like I'm on this like surfboard and I'm balancing, and like everything personally is pretty good. Like I just got this pup about a month ago, and he's really sweet, and he's doing great, and I'm kind of plodding along through a couple projects, like trying to get my writing feet back under me again, and
Yeah.
because I took a little bit of a break just because the like the cosmic empathy of the last several weeks, I just couldn't write.
Mm.
I would do pieces here and there, but had no regular practice, and so I'm getting back into it a little bit. Like, so everything personally is pretty good, but I just feel like I'm on that surfboard, like whoa, like going into the spinning into the black hole, so it's just every bit of it, like all the promotional stuff, trying to keep on top of like social media. And I feel like a lot of people are feeling kind of burnt out by social media, but also a lot of the way that we um, approach content in the world is through social media. And it feels like everything's kind of folding in that way. And trying to stay on top of other writing projects, so there's just a lot
Yeah.
there's a lot of stuff that I feel like I'm the duck's feet under the water, that I'm just like, all the emails are like, absolutely, you bet, and I'm just like sweating. But in a good way. I like, again, like everything, like I'm so excited to share the novel that's coming out in September. I really believe in that story, and I think that'll be kind of an exciting like triangulation of vibes between Edenville and Poorly Made. Like, it's got that kind of bonkers, an ensemble cast of these caricature sort of types who are sort of fun. But then it's also the like, I don't know, despair and fighting against hopelessness that is at the heart of Poorly Made. So I feel like it'll be a nice sort of, I don't know, marriage of those vibes. So I'm really excited to share that one. I've seen drafts of the cover that are really fucking cool.
I love it.
So yeah. So again, it's just like, I think that's just kind of the writer life now. There's so much to balance, and so much of it is really positive when it's all going well, but it's just so much energy, So
I mean, my impression is that you've had a good experience with the community. So you talked about StokerCon and
yeah.
like all those folks being like Losers Club and like rallying and everything. But my impressions on social media is that like you got like you're in the group and like everybody's, you know, like you're just part of the gang, and so that's got to
Oh, that's
feel
cool.
comforting in a way. Like, and I
Yeah.
feel like before we dig into that, I feel like I've talked to a lot of folks who feel like, oh, I want to be in the group, and I'm like, I see you in the group. Like Clay McLeod Chapman, who I talked to recently, he has a real kind of like, he's like, I'm trying to get in, and I'm like, you've been
uh,
in, like,
yeah.
so that's got to feel kind of strange, but like I definitely see, um, yeah, like I definitely see you as being a part of that like really incredibly supportive community. So that's got to feel like a safe place to be. Like we know
Yeah.
social media is garbage and it's hit or miss, and the fucking world is ending. I spent like I think 40 minutes talking to Chris Pantier about punching Nazis. Um,
Yeah,
so like
not
it's
long enough.
bad. I know, I know,
um
I know.
but yeah, so it's funny because you say all that, but then I'm like, I don't know what I would do to like argue for getting rid of it or whatever, because like you and I connected through social media,
Yeah,
and that allowed you to like read the book, and like we set up this interview, and so like and fans reach out all
yeah,
the time, which is always like so cool. And I really had to like have a moment with that. I was at a New Year's Eve party at a friend's house, and they were still kind of setting up because it was early, and so I sat outside and I was like responding to messages on Instagram, and I just had a moment where I was like, I need to slow down and appreciate that like I'm not like answering emails, quote unquote. I'm like responding to messages from people, and the only reason we're talking is because they loved my books and like reached out to say that, so like
yeah.
there's so much good stuff on social media. And I don't know, I didn't like I mean, the imposter syndrome is forever, I think, but it I really had such a good experience at Horror Reader Weekend, that Christine Harold put together in the first weekend of November, uh, up at Bear Mountain. Is that right? Forgetting, but but that was really sweet, and that was a really like kind of tight crew, and so I got to really spend some time with authors that I'd kind of tangentially hung out with, like C.J. Lead and Rachel Harrison and
Yeah,
Matt Cassidy and Heltzel, and so that was really cool, and it's experiences like that I feel like, because StokerCon is like so much, and I feel like I'm
it's a
kind of
lot. Yeah.
bouncing from person to like just walking to the bathroom, you meet like four people that you're like, oh my god,
Yep. Yeah.
so having the space to actually like have a drink with people that I really admire both on a professional and personal level was really nice. And then even that didn't really sink in until we were doing blurb outreach last week for the new novel, and my editor was like, I'm not, you have so many positive connections, I'm not worried about it. Like reach out to these people, and like I know that you know them personally, and blah blah blah. And so that, even that is like so different from Eatonville, where I was like sweatily
Yeah.
writing these requests to people that I had met like once, like dear Tim Wagoner, I took your class online, you
Yeah.
probably don't remember me, like, so it is such a freaking welcoming community, and like
Yeah.
it's so funny to hear other people say that, because I know Clay is not alone in that feeling, and I know I'm not either. That everyone's just kind of like, I can't believe I get to be here. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
Um, but those connections I think are like, so I went to that author con for that took place in St. Louis. 100%
Mm.
because it cost like $35 for the weekend and I could drive there. Um, So thank you, Brian Keene, for doing that. Because I that's where I met Clay in person. I met Jonathan
Mm,
Jans in person. I met Chris Panettiere there, and even it was
wow.
just those three dudes. Like, um, the weekend was totally worth it because like that in person connection where you can actually like just it's not for a thing. You're just being people around each other
Yeah.
is kind of more powerful than I think we really give it credit for. So I love those things. And I did a little one where I went. It was just nearby my house, and that's where I met Josh Hull, and
Oh, sure. Yeah.
he's like a super sweet dude. Ran into Daniel Kraus, hung out with
Mm,
Josh Mallerman. So like those in person experiences are like they really kind of like, at least for me, they like fill me up. They kind of remind me why I'm like spending so much time reading books and recording conversations and stuff. So
yeah.
I think there's a ton of value there that we don't really maybe always think about or realize.
Especially as a writer, because I think when you're hanging out in person with other writers and you start to ask them about their projects or what's like big on their mind, they always get the same, like, there's a flash of sort of a like, war flashback. And you're like, how's your work in progress going? And there's always a split second where every other writer is like, just like a little bit of a wince or something, or they like give a heavy nod or something.
Yeah.
And I think for people who have spent vast amounts of time by themselves doing the same, like staring into the abyss, that's really important. So
Yeah.
yeah, anyone who's listening who's like on the fence about going to cons or anything, get off that fucking fence. Like come to cons. Everyone is so nice. And that's been the crazy thing too. The last Stoker Con, because my first Stoker Con, I hid in my hotel room most of the time. I was so nervous. I barely went
Yeah.
to anything. And then the last one I went to, I saw this guy like clock me and then nervously like stand up and like come over and be like, I was such a big fan of Edenville. And I was like, how am I on the other side of this already?
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
like that,
Totally.
it's so crazy. So yeah, are you coming to Scares That Care in Virginia in a couple weeks?
No, I'm
Alas.
tragically Midwest, and so me and Clay have had arguments about like all the my position is that all the good stuff happens on the East Coast or some of it on the West Coast.
Mm,
And he's like, you guys get a ton of stuff. And there were some examples, but still. So, no, I won't be, I don't know what the next thing I'm going to is, because there was a couple of things in Indiana and one of them fell
mm.
through because the venue closed down. And so
Oh,
I don't
geez.
have anything on the books right now, which is kind of sad because like, I like those little dopamine hits of like meeting up with friends or befriending people and then turning that into kind of future connection and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, which is funny too, because that's how it all really comes together, right? Is just meeting people that you click with at cons, and that was kind of I don't know, not a learning curve, but like something that felt kind of obvious in hindsight, where I was like, how do I make these connections? And then, would just hang out with people at cons. And then all of a sudden the time comes for something official. And you're like, okay, well, now I have these, connections, whatever.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm feeling like the vibes are very tight right now. And so I feel like, let's any way that we can just relax a bit, like even just hanging out with
Yeah.
fellow horror writers and not even talking about the work or anything, just
Mhm.
like being in that space, taking a breath. But
Yeah. I
yeah,
could not agree with you more. And that's why, like, I selfishly, this for me is like my kind of safe place where I can just have a positive experience and not have to think about, I can complain about the chaos in the world if I want to, but like,
yeah,
I don't have to. I can just make this, we can make this conversation what we need it to be. So selfishly, like I've kind of given myself a safe way to process through things, but um, yeah, like we need to. consciously protect ourselves when things are bad, and things haven't really been not bad since like 2020. So like,
Yeah.
we should be practicing it. We just have to like be more intentional about the things that we do, the people that we interact with,
Yeah.
and I think also intentional about like what we put out there. So like,
Mm.
I've been really pissed off recently about, I've been seeing on Instagram like these book influencers being like, these are the books that I'd have to reread in hell, and it's like
Oh,
just
I saw
shitting.
your post. Yeah, where you're
Yeah,
like, what the fuck?
just shitting on books because they didn't like them, and it's like, a lot of those are objectively good, so you must be stupid. B, why would you spend your energy and time just being negative about something?
Yeah.
Who's that benefiting? Like, is it, it's going to get you clicks, it might get you like engagement, but at the end you're just kind of a garbage person. And so
Yeah.
I've been trying to just be, I just want to say nice things. If I'm not going to say a nice thing, I just don't talk. And guess what? That works. Like, there's no problem there. So
The old rule from everyone's mom: if you don't have anything nice to say, like, don't say anything at
yes.
all. Turns out it works. And you know what? I will say, I have heard from friends who live elsewhere in the country. Like, I have a friend who lives in Miami who is like, yeah, that's not true down here. But in upstate New York, it's a we're in an interesting area because we have a lot of Trumpers around, but it's kind of a blue leaning area, and I just feel like there are a lot of people here who are making an effort to be a little bit nicer. Like, the vibe that I'm getting off just strangers is a little bit nicer than it was a month ago, and maybe that's
Huh.
wishful thinking, but I would like to think that we're in a place where um, we can tell that as a country we're in a really bad spot, and so just on a interpersonal level, like the people at the gas stations, the lady at the grocery store, like, even like I had to call my health insurance yesterday, and like the woman I was on the phone with was like especially nice.
Huh.
So I feel like, and again, maybe this is just my like dumb, naive wishful thinking, but like I like to think that on an interpersonal level, people are trying to at least put a little bit of light back out there. And so again, I don't know if that's just me. And again, you live in a totally different part of the country. Have you experienced that vibe at all? Like, is that
I feel
just
like
me?
everybody's just kind of like, like you can see the vibrations of anxiety on like everybody.
Yeah.
Um, and no one's blowing up, but like no one's like hugging either. So I feel like it's just kind of this
Mm.
tentative kind of vibe. But but I love the optimism of what you're saying, and like I feel like that is good. Like I would love to see that, but also if they're a Nazi, you got to fucking punch them. So like,
That, yeah, that could be too. Like, maybe they're being a little bit nicer because they're smug, because they're like, you
it's
know,
my time,
yeah, fellow white person, have a good day, fellow white person.
right?
Like, whatever. Oh, oh God, now I got to really pay attention to it. But
I know.
yeah, no, it's true. Um, but yeah, I like that idea too of being intentional with the work that you're putting out there. I think even if it's a bit of escapism, like we need those safe bubbles of escapism.
Yeah.
Like, to the point where if I start reading or watching something and there's a clear Trump analog, I'm just not interested.
Yeah.
I like
Yeah.
I'm in my little escapism bubble for an hour. I'm not looking at my phone or whatever, and I don't want it in the thing. I appreciate, like, universal themes. Like, I just rewatched Lord of the Rings because I got my dog Frodo, so I was like, we gotta, you
You
know,
got to do it. Yeah.
yeah. um, and I like sobbed after Fellowship because it just
Yeah.
really struck me like the man was in the trenches fighting Uruk-hai, and now we have a fucking orc for president, and the orcs are tearing everything down, and burning all the trees, literally, and all this shit. And so those, like, more sort of universally themed stories are really affecting me now, and
Yeah.
the like really specific ones are affecting me a little bit less. I don't know. There's probably like a psychological name for why that is, like
Yeah.
closeness fallacy or whatever. Like if it's too close to home, you know.
Yeah. It's like the
But
uncanny valley of
yeah,
empathy or something. I don't know.
yeah.
Um,
Um, I don't know. Like,
I
are you
get you though.
feeling?
Like
Oh, go ahead.
I
Sorry.
was talking to someone at work today about just movies we like, and he was like,
Mhm.
I recently rewatched the Lord of the Rings series. Um, and he's talking to a coworker had not seen it, and he's like, "You got to watch it. It's about fighting fascism." Like he
Mhm.
just straight up said that, and I'm like thinking about it. I'm like, yeah, dude's totally right. Like he could not be more on the money about
Yeah.
that. So yeah,
I highly encourage people, if you're looking for something that feels cathartic but also escapist, Lord of the Rings really struck me, especially Fellowship of the Ring. There's a lot of imagery in Fellowship of the Ring that really stood out to me this time around. Like when they're the first time they run into the ring wraiths, and all the ring wraiths like are swooping in with their big black uniforms, and they all lift their swords as one, and Frodo's up against a corner, and Merry and Pippin like zip in, never held a sword before, and are about
yep,
to like fight these things, these monsters, and that I was just like, that's gonna be me and my like dipshit friends, never held a gun before,
yep,
thrust into some draft, fighting on Russian soil against people that we like don't know and like aren't like, so there's just a lot in those films now that is really resonating with me on sort of a thematic level,
yeah.
um, but yeah, I don't know. What were we talking about? What was the
Yeah. Well, it very loosely. I think we traveled down this road from um like the order that you made the books in versus the order they came out in. But I don't
oh
I
gosh.
don't care what got us here, because yeah, we like sometimes you just have to have that conversation. But I do. We'll do the hard pivot then.
Okay, we
To
can meander back from
away.
Middle
Yeah.
Earth to, yeah, speaking of in-depth worlds, I don't know.
No. Yeah. Well, I don't mind an awkward transition. So, but so one of the themes that I wanted to talk about, and hopefully that'll get us to kind of tag into some of the specific stories. I want to start with, I'm calling it spoiled earth. That can be an imperfect term, but because of the way that this area, Renfield County, exists, the reason that the bad things happen the way they do feels kind of spoiled earthy to me.
Hmm.
Where a bad thing happened, maybe inspired by something, but a bad thing happened, and the unexpected result of that was that um, kind of like an evil permeated the area. Is that
Hmm.
reasonable to say?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Um, do you have, because you kind of mentioned before that you have examples of other books that
Yeah.
you feel like are in the spoiled earth oeuvre?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Um, so I've got a few. And these are just like the ones that I thought of off the top of my head. And some of them just kind of touch on the idea. Some of them live in the idea. I read this a couple of years ago. Hatchet
Exciting.
Girls,
Oh, I don't know this one.
Diana Rodriguez Wallach. It's
Wow.
a YA book that's basically
Oh my
like
god.
um,
Hey, how did I write
Lizzie
this down?
Borden's story, but in the modern day.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
But where it takes place around Lizzie Borden's kind of like home, there's like some real world creepy stuff that goes on in the land. And so she kind of incorporated that into this story, and like maybe that's kind of causing these awful things to happen in the area. So
Hmm.
um, this I did talk about this on the podcast like 2 years ago, but it's got that kind of idea, and I think it's been a long time, and there's probably 80 books in between reading that and now. But wherever Lizzie Borden that stuff happened, there's like this kind of area that's got like she visited for research and was like, you didn't hear any animals in the woods, like weird, creepy
Bro.
stuff. And it's got legends around it and stuff. So
Oh,
Um, yeah, that's one.
okay.
This
That's a good
one I'm
one.
sure you know of, and
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
Jenny Kiefer's "This Wretched Valley"
Yes.
is
Also
really
a Stoker nominee now.
there. You,
Congrats, Jenny.
I have not read it, but from what I understand, rightfully so, because it's supposed to be fantastic.
Yeah.
And that one I feel is more on the nose because, like, that's almost, from what I understand, the antagonist is like a evil land that lures people to it. So,
Hmm.
um,
That is, and everyone asks about the Hudson Valley. Like, why is the Hudson Valley so spooky? Why? Who doesn't ask? People from the Hudson Valley. Like
they
no
just
one
get
from the
it.
Hudson. Yeah, yeah, they just get it. Actually, had a friend come to visit, and he brought his girlfriend along, and she had not spent much time in the Hudson Valley. Um, Especially not at night. Like I'd been up a couple times during the day to like pick apples or whatever, quintessential Hudson Valley bullshit. Um, but at night, like we're driving through, these kind of woodsy roads and it's all dark and quiet, especially in the winter, and she was like, I just feel creeped out. And I was like, yeah, that's just what it is. Like I don't know, like if we're on a ley line or like we have a lot of UFO activity in the area. We've got our own sets of legends. Like there are stories of skinwalkers and stuff around the area. And like, we've got so many disappeared towns, like so many
Yeah,
brickyards and World War II encampments and like all kinds of shit that just like there was no need for that anymore. And so everyone left and abandoned the town, or the town was drowned in a reservoir where they were, funneling water into New York City. Just like all these crazy layers of history and ghosts.
yep,
That
yeah,
like it just is creepy, man.
hmm
Like so, talk about spoiled
inherently
earth.
so.
Like
Yeah,
it has that vibe, and I don't know why, but even in the name, I mean, Henry Hudson explored the Bay Area for a couple of years, and then his crew mutinied. Do you know this?
no,
That okay, so his crew mutinied and put him on a rowboat, and he disappeared. He was never seen again. And Washington Irving kind of incorporated that into the original Rip Van Winkle story. That Rip wanders out into the woods and finds Henry Hudson and his like the loyal members of his crew, and they're kind of hanging out and they're like, have a drink with us. And so he drinks with them and gets drunk and falls asleep for 20 years. And that's the original Rip Van Winkle story. So, like, even in the namesake, in the old, kind of establishing myths of this place, there is mystery and unknown. And so I love the idea of like something in the earth is just kind of off, even before the terrible things happen,
yep,
like such a chicken and the egg. Like, well, was Lizzie Borden? Uh, was it her, or was it the land, or was it both? And that's a little bit of Renfield County as well. I feel like there's a bit,
hmm
um, and I mean, I finished this book like a year and a half ago at this point. So I'm like, I think I remember that there's a bit where, like in one of the interstitial emails, Rachel kind of mentions like, yeah, even the Lenape who lived around this area didn't go into the valley very much,
yeah,
and so like just from the get go, even before the actual curse sets in, there's something here, and so I feel like that's kind of the Hudson Valley as well.
hmm
But yeah, that's my tangent about spoiled Earth. Did you have another one? I feel like you were about to pull
I
out.
have one other one, but I will
Okay.
say, so that kind of thing that was something that was on my mind too. Was like, for the sake of your stories, like the feeling I got was like, it's not like the people there are unaware that
Mm.
weird bad stuff happens, but it's just kind of how it is, as opposed to being like, hey, this something bad here, we need to leave. And so
Yeah.
it's I got that kind of feeling like it hasn't kicked in yet, that it's just not worth it to stick around. Um,
Right.
because historically problems arise pretty regularly, but I love the idea of um like someone, like a population at one point got wise and was like, we're leaving, and then it was
Mm-hmm.
just kind of left alone, but then
Mm-hmm.
other people come in, and whether it's hubris or just like naivete or whatever, like go to the bad place and then bad things happen. I love that idea. So like that's just one of the things I thought about with that spoiled earth thing, is like sometimes like people figure it out and that's why it's untouched or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
but then other people come through. But like I feel like in the existence of your Renfield County right now, it hasn't hit that point yet where people are wise enough to be like, is it worth it to like to stick around?
Yeah.
Or maybe they're just too entrenched in, generational existence or whatever. But yeah, I love that kind of thought too.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I think there's something kind of cartoony about it now that you mention it, because I'm thinking of other worlds where characters continue to hang out. I mean, like, growing up, I was a big fan of Tim Burton movies, and that feels kind of like Burton's world, where you have the weird people like the Beetlejuices and the Edward Scissorhands, but then everyone else around that is kind of a caricature enough in and of themselves to kind of put up with the creepy caricatures, like um
Yeah, good
and
point. I like that.
or like Invader Zim was a big show for me when I was
Yeah,
a kid, and that is like in that town, kids are having their internal organs replaced with like inanimate objects and shit, and like all this stuff is happening, and like so I think there is something kind of fun inherently about a world that just feels so pervasively and intrinsically spooky, because
yeah.
um, if the people are crazy enough to live there, then they have to have their own kind of things going on, which will be also something kind of fun to play with in the new novel Galloway's Gospel. Um, is populated by this big ensemble cast of people who grew up in Renfield and are therefore kind of caricatures of
Yeah.
sort of archetypical um, flat characters in a really fun way. So yeah, I don't know. It's just kind of a fun thing to play around with.
Well, and what this is my first kind of dip into a specific story, and I will talk about the other book in a minute. But I just flashed it like a real
I
tease.
saw it. Yeah,
I don't know if you saw what it was, but
I got it.
um,
I haven't read that
you
one
did.
either.
Oh my
But
god. Well, since we're talking about it,
okay,
no. I'm going to say the thing really quick.
okay.
Um, I love kind of like the feeling of what you were just talking about a little bit. Gave me the thought of um, talking about WAG and like
Mm,
in that area, or like having the feeling or knowing what that space is like, driving down a road and just seeing some old dude in a bathtub. Like there is 0% chance that you're going to think there's a positive or a happy story here.
yeah.
Something scary is happening with weird dude in bathtub or whatever. So like I like what, like you, I like the idea that just the setting kind of starts to tell the story, if that makes
Mm.
sense.
Yeah, and now that you
Yeah.
say that, there's something kind of haunted house about that like
Mm-hmm.
um that's kind of my approach to story in general, is that it's just fun. And I was talking about this with Clay a couple of weeks ago, that like for him the horror is in writing things that scare him, and that is how he approaches a lot of stories, especially Wake Up and Open Your Eyes. That was a situation that scared him, and I feel like for
Yep.
me it's situations that excite me, so like
Yeah.
the idea of going to figure out like what the dude in the bathtub's deal is excites me, in the same way that like if you're in a haunted house and you turn a corner and there's a dude sitting in a bathtub, and you're like, oh fuck, I gotta walk through this guy, and you signed up for it, right? Like you paid to be
Yeah.
in the haunted house, and it's all for fun. And so like my reaction in those moments when I'm in the haunted house is always to kind of start laughing, because I'm just like, oh man, I can't believe, like, now I gotta walk by this guy.
Yeah.
And So that is always how I think about stuff. It's not the stuff that like scares me, but when I think of the monsters or the real horrific scenes, and people say like, "Oh, that was a really horrific thing," I'm like, "Yeah," you know. So, and then the stuff that really scares me is all the interpersonal stuff. You know, their relationships. Like
Yeah.
a moment that I think is really harrowing in WAG that no one talks about because the rest of the story is, I guess, objectively harrowing. But like just the image of that girl Harmony, and she's like giving this like sad hand job to her like dipshit boyfriend and looking out at the valley and wanting more, and
Hmm.
knowing that that's not accessible to her, so the only way that she can kind of have more or have an adventure is to go see this guy in the tub, you know. Like there
To
are,
flirt with danger, like that kind of
yeah,
thing.
you
Yeah.
know, so like those are the really scary moments to me. Or like, you know, Hector Brim, even the last couple lines where it's just like everyone is alone. Um, you know, I think it's overshadowed by him like eating the soul rocks, but that's not the scary thing to me. You know what I mean? So like that's
Yeah.
kind of the the funny thing about that world. Especially because it came out of a place or a time in my life when, um, you know, I was going through like this bad breakup, and a lot of other things were happening, and so relationships were kind of a scary thing to me then, and the monsters were kind of a fun thing. And so
Yeah.
Renfield County just sort of feels that way to me, where the people are truly terrifying and the monsters are like kind of a reprieve in a way. And so every time I hear someone read one of these stories and say that they feel the opposite, like, oh man, when that, you know, Allison's face when she's cutting them up, that was really horrific. I couldn't even turn the page. I'm like,
Right.
what for? That's the fun stuff. What do you mean?
Yeah.
You know? So yeah.
Well, the WAG thing that stuck out for me was, and I think that in my mind, I'm really fascinated by the idea of like transgression and punishment in like storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
And so the thing that manifested in that story for me was like parents will tell you not to do stuff all the time, right? Like they just tell you like you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that. Sometimes like it's serious, sometimes it's like I just don't want to deal with that bullshit. And so
Mm-hmm.
like we don't always take parental warning seriously. But in the case of this story, like whether they knew it or not, the parents were actually like right, and like
Yeah.
obviously, you know, kids will be kids. And so I like that idea of like you were warned and you did the thing anyway, you know. For
Yeah.
me, I think that's a I think the thing that is effective about that for me in stories in general is like the inescapability of like once you did the thing, here's what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of felt that here a little bit.
Yeah, well, that's great. I And that also I think resonates with what we're experiencing now on a
Yeah.
sort of national level. You know, you had so many people who I see these long posts that people reshare on like Facebook or whatever, um, that are like, well, this isn't what I voted for when I voted for Trump. It's like, yeah, but it is. You didn't realize, like, you were
Right.
tricked or you were too dumb or whatever. Like,
You were
um,
hearing what you wanted to hear. Yep.
yeah. And, you know, I've been working with these, this is such a tangent, but I've been working, because I'm a writing center tutor is my day job. And so I see a lot of the same assignments come through. When a professor assigns something, I'll see like 8 of those papers in a
Yeah.
day. You know, so it's
Hmm.
a lot of like rhetorical analysis of a commercial or whatever. And the day of the election was one of the last days I was on Twitter, before I nuked my account, and saw a political ad for Trump, and it was like these pencil sketch outline kind of cartoony things of him like hugging a child and like, you know, like pumping his fist when he with the bloody ear, you know, and all the shit. And I was like, damn it, this is a really, like, rhetorical analysis speaking, this is a really effective commercial. Like, this
Yeah.
is the audience that this is catering to, and the language is all like, who stands up for you and who fights for whatever, blah blah blah. I was like, damn it, this is a really, like, this is nailing its audience.
Hmm.
And yeah, I don't know how that relates to old wag, but um, but, but yeah, the idea of transgression and then like fuck around and find out, I guess,
Yeah.
and that
Yep.
self perpetuating cycle of like, being told not to do something, and the human arrogance or stubbornness or whatever that drives you to do it because you're told not to do it, I think is also why a lot of people did vote the way that they did. It's like, you
Yeah.
can't tell me what to do,
Right.
so
Yeah. It's
anyway.
almost like don't press the red button immediately makes you want to press the red button. Like it's a
Yeah.
natural, it's like an instinctual thing for us. And so, yeah, like how do you nudge people into not pressing the red button without blatantly saying, don't press the red button? So,
Yeah.
but like Spoiled Earth, I just want to, you saw it already.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
Wonderland by Zoya Stage, which came out, I want to say like 2019 or so.
Mhm.
Um, a family moves to upstate New York, which apparently is where everything awful ever happened.
Yep.
Um, and it's like, one of the like the mom or the dad had like their successful career in the city and everything, and now they were like switching gears and supported the other career, and that involved moving to this like house in the middle of nowhere, like upstate New York. And like throughout the book, you find out that like the land wants to keep them there, and like the land is
Mm.
interested in them and like manipulates them, and it gets really creepy. So it's kind of almost like Hungry Land. Like
Mm.
I need to keep you. I can't let you go. Um, as opposed to like Angry Land or whatever.
Mm. That makes me think of The Shining too. That you have
Yeah.
this like hungry place that
Yeah.
is trying to use Danny as this like ultimate beacon of
Hmm.
psychic evil, right? Um, Incredible idea that the movie, of course, shuns. But yeah, I like that idea of hungry land that isn't angry, because I think
Yeah.
that is very Renfield County as well. That Renfield County is just kind of hungry and like giggling. It's the art, the clown. It's not like cursed burial ground or anything. It's just like kind of got its own tee hee. They will say I have another couple books that wrote during the pandemic that kind of got pushed to the wayside as these ones were coming out. But um, I'm fingers crossed and knocking on wood that maybe they'll be out in the world at some point soon. Um, but those books kind of focus on Braddock County, which is right next to Renfield, which to me is the more like suburban, sort of
Hmm.
industrialized, like, and in that world, the land is angry for sure because they're building new neighborhoods all the time. They're building new developments, and the land is reacting to it. So that's kind of a fun sandbox to play in. That's different from Renfield County, whereas Renfield
Interesting.
County
Yeah.
is kind of like an escape and it's and sort of fun. There's something about those Braddock County stories that feel bitter in a way, which is also sort of my reaction to the way that the Hudson Valley is changing, because it just they're carving so much nature away to build new apartment buildings and people moving up from the city and all this stuff. And of course, that's its own like stupid, self-eating worm, because then you get like wildlife in the neighborhoods and people are like,
Right.
oh my God, how could we have this fox wandering around the neighborhood? Somebody kill it. And you're like, yeah,
Like the fox has always been here,
yeah,
bitches.
yeah, this
Yeah.
is his fucking neighborhood. And we have just like this crazy, like we had this giant tortoise in our front yard, and we're like, what did you run away from that now you're like so off? Like what got torn down or whatever raised,
Yep.
Um,
Yeah.
But anyway, God, I'm really on a soapbox tonight. I didn't mean to be so.
I'm
like,
loving it. I'm here for
uh,
it.
but but yeah. So that's my all that is to say. I love that idea of Renfield being hungry land and then Braddock County being angry land. And I'm kind of looking over at my shelf. Have you read Tell Me I'm Worthless?
No, I mean I know
Uh,
of it, but I have not read it. Yeah,
that's a great example of a hungry house, like a
yeah.
just a hungry, angry bit of land. But yeah, I don't know.
Well, you kind of teed it up for me a little bit because the other kind
Okay.
of big concept that I wanted to talk about was shared universe. We talked a little bit about how like obviously Edenville and the Poorly Made, and then your next um, already announced novel, Ga- Galloway's
Galloway's Gospel.
Gospel. Thank you so much. I was
Yeah.
like, I knew I had part of it at least. Are all Renfield County kind of connected stories. And I feel like this may just be me not having the deepest knowledge of horror or anything, but like I feel like that's something that people are visiting, like the idea of like connecting their stories, like
Mm.
lately more than maybe I really kind of knew. And I've got three examples. I got three examples of that too. So the first one is I don't know, shuffling around while I'm moving things. Josh Malerman, all of his books take place in
Oh,
Michigan.
yeah.
And so he's got their like so Daphne is what I'm holding up right now for anybody who's just hearing audio. Um that takes place in Sam Hatton. He's got the town of Goblin.
Mm-hmm.
He's got I can't remember the name of the town that Unburied Carol took place in, but like
Mm.
all of his stories take place in Michigan in these kind of like created like towns.
Mm.
In his mind, like, he just kind of and so I'm trying to get him to like actually map out the locations on like an
Oh,
actual
fun.
Michigan map
Yeah.
because I've read all of his stuff and I just think it'd be fascinating to see how they relate to each other. But even though they don't really overlap, except for a little bit with like his novella collection Goblin,
Mm-hmm.
other stories kind of dip into that town and things like that. There's a little overlap of where things take place, but there's not really like character overlap. But like you
Mm.
could tell he's building like it's all a tapestry that like exists together, and I thought that's kind of cool. Um, Another
Yeah, that's a
example,
cool.
very contemporary example, is Eric LaRocca.
Oh,
Um,
sure. Yeah.
so
The
everything that darkness eats takes
Henley's
place in
Edge. Yeah.
Henley's Edge, and then also. Why am I not thinking of the name of the most? At Dark I Become Loathsome
Oh,
also takes
sure.
place
Yeah.
in Henley's Edge. So
Yeah.
he's kind of, even if those stories aren't actually connected, they share, you know, they share a common location and stuff. So, and
Yeah.
then the other one, which I'm excited about, is Todd Kiesling. Um,
Oh, yeah.
so when I talked to him about this book called Black and Infinite, which is a short story collection, I accidentally hit on the fact that like he's building his own kind of like continuum with um why is my brain not working? What's that mountain range?
Oh, the
Um
not Adirondacks. What am
that's
I?
what I was thinking too, and I know it's
Yeah.
wrong. The
Yeah.
Appalachian,
Yeah.
yeah, mountains and stuff, that Appalachian area. Um and so like I believe his actual stories may actually kind of connect more than just like geographically.
Mm.
But all of this is to say I feel like it's a comfortable place to be in right now where you give things a common place or a little bit of crossover one way or another. And so when I hear about this stuff, I'm like, I'm automatically in. Um, I love that. I love the idea of like, even if they just kind of like butt up against each other, like the idea that stories are touching,
Yeah.
I really like that. And so, um, honestly, that made me way more enthusiastic about reading The Poorly Made after having missed missed the ability to read Edenville kind of contemporaneously. So, um, where where did that like that idea had to start somewhere for you? where you're like, oh, I wrote this story and now I'm going to write this story or whatever. So
Yeah.
how did that kind of blossom for you?
Well, I don't remember the like really early date. It was like 10 years ago that I got really into the Universal monster movies, like the old black and white. And the best guy in those, I think, is Dwight Fry as Renfield, and then he comes back and plays Igor or Fritz in one of the Frankenstein ones. Um, I was just blown away by his performance and the idea of that character, someone who is driven mad and used by forces that are so far beyond his control or understanding. You know, he's kind of, he's like gets the short end of the stick. Renfield does because he um, doesn't have the luxury of all the doctors like expository speeches about why this is happening or whatever. He just sort of shouts about spiders and birds and then dies. You know, even in the new Nosferatu, like he doesn't have a full idea of the like what's happening, and then those dudes just like he starts screaming, and those dudes run in and start beating him with clubs. You know, it's like 18th or 19th century medicine. It's like beat him silent. But so I was working on a lot of short stories around that time that were, you know, based in, um, you know, small upstate towns because you write what you know, and I was very interested in that Universal monster universe and how those movies start to connect, even in sort of silly ways, like Abbott and Costello get in there and have kind of their own monster mash at a certain point. They have a couple monster mashes actually, because they have a couple crossover movies. Um, so I think at a certain point, those two ideas just sort of melded that you could have this extended universe, and you know, it could take place in this the way that I saw upstate New York. And so some of the first stories that I wrote in the world aren't necessarily specifically part of the world, but are born out of that same impulse to like, how can I, um, you know, weave this tapestry and present this upstate New York world this way. Um,
Mhm.
and then at a certain point, it kind of became convenience, like, you know, okay, well, I named this town Bartrick Mill, and I like have this other story that also takes place in kind of a small town, and so let me just make that one Bartrick Mill as well, and then like only after I had a draft of all the stories in Poorly Made and was stringing them together was I like, all right, let's map this out and like figure out. You know, I said that this town was north, but then the next story I said that it was south. So like, how can I, you know, weave that together? Um, and then all the like really solid connections, like all the really clear connective tissue came after we sold it. And then my editor
Mm.
really went through it with me and was like, okay, so what's the specific connection here? Because a lot of them were just sort of standalones, that I like plugged into the world, you know, like the Southbound G was just sort of its own thing. And I
Yeah.
really struggled with that one because it was getting all these rejections. And I just wanted it to be like its own sort of weird Edward Hopper painting, you know, like I didn't want a big story attached to it. I didn't want to like do anything to it. And so like even the small amount that I changed about it to make it more specifically in the mythos, I was kind of like, I don't know. I just wanted it to be some crazy guy on a train. Um, and so there were a couple stories like that, like, you know, Hector Brim. I didn't really change at all, except to have him like briefly say, like, this box is Renfield Wood. And then I was like, great,
Right. Yep.
now he's in it, you know? So all of that stuff was kind of late in the game. And yeah, I don't know. So it kind of was just by like slow degrees over the course of years, that it
Yeah.
all sort of strung together. And actually, even today was sort of making a document for another project that was like, here's all the overlap between all the stories that have come out so far. And there was less overlap than I thought. That, like in my head, making this list was going to be a Herculean feat. And then typing it out, I was like, okay, I guess like the specific elements of overlap aren't like that list isn't totally big, but there are just a lot of world elements that like the list of
Right.
all the world elements is huge, but the amount of overlap between the stories is relatively smaller than I kind of expected it to be. Um, so I don't know. It's just kind of interesting to think about, but yeah, that's my long story short of how this all came together.
Well, I kind of like the idea that so from a reader's perspective, the real connection is like you put these all in a book together and told us that they are connected. Like, so, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, there's a little bit of like implied like I wouldn't do this if it didn't make sense.
Mm.
That like we just kind of go along with naturally. And so like Southbound G you mentioned, um, I agree with you 100%. Like, I didn't find a greater kind of like synth- synthesizing with other stories too much, but
Mm.
like at the same time, I was like, well, thinking about it now, I'm like, I don't want it to be different. And you always have the grace of being like, there's parts of the story you don't understand, and so like as a
Mm.
reader, if I don't immediately understand what the connection is, either I overlook something because I wasn't paying attention,
Mm.
or you've got a bigger idea that I just haven't seen yet. And so like I feel like if you spent too much time saying we have to do A, then B, then C for every story, that would kind of get boring. But like if
Mm.
I do get challenged a little bit where I'm like, I don't see it immediately the connection, but you know, it's got to be there. I feel like that feels more natural too.
Yeah, and that was part of the pushback that I got from some readers on Edenville, and you haven't read Edenville yet, right? So I won't spoil it.
No, yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
but there are some elements of that I plugged in as kind of a weird unknown or like what the fuck.
yeah,
Like they at one point visit the old biology building off campus, and they've heard the legend of the Edenville butcher,
yeah,
and the building's empty at this point. So they're like, "Oh, I guess like that legend wasn't true, or she left, or whatever." And then that, of course, is the story of Allison's face. Like that's
yep,
them in the house. And so there were some weird things like that in Edenville that plug into the poorly made, but then there were some elements that I leave unanswered on purpose because part of the gimmick of the world is to, um, in order to survive, you have to be okay with not knowing something, right? Like if those kids were just
I
like,
love it.
well, whatever, he just
Yep.
sits in a tub, like what are we like, you know? You have to let go of
Right.
some of that stuff, which it feels very real to me, not just with horrific things, but even like, again, those interpersonal things. Like, um, so many times you walk away from conversations with people and you're like, well, I don't know what he's thinking or whatever. Did he think this or that? It's just like, it's hard to know, and I'm not going to stress about it. And so there were a lot of
Yep.
sort of those true crimey elements in Edenville that are mixed in
Mm.
with all the stuff that's like answered in other parts of the world for me. And so I think that mix was kind of like off-putting or confusing to some readers. And I hope that the deeper we get into the world, the more clearer that'll be. Um,
Hmm.
but but yeah, that was kind of an interesting thing to see people react to because it like, and that kind of made me think about the difference between those two genres. Like the true crime genre really feeds on stories where the ending is we'll never know, but
Yeah.
horror, if you have that, you kind of have to have the we'll never know, but it could have been this or this.
You have to give, yeah, you have to give them some options to like mentally settle with. Yeah.
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 And I think the best exposition is when it's kind of like it could be this, this, or this, but one of them is clearly the choice. Like even I was just talking about Clay's book. Like I think Clay does that really well, where like it's all this noise and all these people who are like, well, it could be this, or it could be this, or it could be demons. or it could be this, or it could be this, you know. And so you're like, all right, that's like a clear answer that I can kind of pick out of the noise, but it's buried enough in noise that
Yeah.
it feels effective. Or like the Blair Witch Project is also another good example of that, I think, where like
Hmm.
you have the answers in some of the interviews in the beginning, but not enough, and it's sort of buried under noise that the ending is still one of the best endings of a horror movie ever. I think, like, um,
Yeah.
so so yeah.
I like that you mentioned Allison's face because that's probably my favorite story
Oh
in the
gosh,
whole collection.
nice.
Um, which I don't know if that says something about me, but for anybody,
Weirdo, freak. No, that's
so
my
for
favorite
anybody
too.
listening who hasn't, yeah, it's so good. And like, so anybody who hasn't read it, who's listening, I'll give the spoiler free idea, which is like this really shy girl in college, for reasons, is at a party, and some of the people at the party are like, we're gonna go check out this spooky place, and she is invited along, and then it turns out the place is really spooky, and I'm really not gonna go much farther than that. But the thing that I think really made it like so good for me was, um, you subverted expectations about what was good and what was bad,
Mm,
and what it means to feel seen or accepted or at home or something like that.
mm,
And so, um, the shock of like the horror of what happens in the story doesn't prepare you for kind of the outcome, but the outcome is kind of weirdly really sweet.
yeah,
If that makes sense. Or I
yeah.
read it totally wrong, but like it left me with
No,
a feeling of like, oh, I like that.
no, that's really great. I really appreciate that, and I feel like that's a good litmus test for like who's a real horror creepo and who's not. It's like you know that uh, what was big for me with that one was Midsommar, and
Which I haven't seen, and I know I'm awful for
oh
that.
gosh, okay. So yeah, similar vibes that like the emotional arc is completed in a way that is clearly satisfying for the main character, um, but in a way that is objectively horrible to witness. And so you're left with this feeling of like cognitive dissonance because you're like,
Yeah.
I'm satisfied as a moviegoer because the arc is complete, but I feel terrible as a person because it was completed through like a terrible thing. Oh no, I hit my mic.
Nice.
Um, I also love Priya Sharma's stuff. All her stories in All the Fabulous Beasts, I think it's called. I was squinting at my shelf. Um, but that like she's got a story in there where this dude like kind of turns half seahorse and then is like giving birth to all these seahorses, like ejaculating them out of his dick, and it's horrible, but he's like loving it. And you know, now that I say that, like a lot of recent works are kind of towing that line. Like I have like 2 hours left of the audiobook for So Thirsty. And
So good.
dude, she does the same kind of thing where she is accessing her freedom and her power through something that she knows is terrible. Um,
Huge parallels actually to this story, Allison's Face, now that I think of
yeah,
it. Yeah.
right. And
Yeah.
so that's the emotional struggle of like the whole book where she's like, and it's such a brilliant like the parallel between her and Naomi, her friend, where
Yeah.
Naomi feels really free but then like oddly constrained by her thirst, and then Sloane is like finding her freedom. That's a really brilliant story. I'm really impressed by it.
Get ready to just cry a lot. I'm telling you right
Okie
now at the end
dokie.
of it.
I'm ready. The audiobook narrator is really great. I meant to look up who she is exactly, but I think she does an amazing job with all the voices. But
Mhm.
But yeah, I think there's something that horror is um, trending to, like a lot of Eric LaRocca's stuff as well, is like that beauty
Hmm.
and pain, Um, so I think there's something that appeals to horror fans, not across the board, but like it is that feeling of the haunted house. You want to walk towards the terrible thing,
Yep.
but at the same time, it's going to be terrible. I don't know where that comes from. I mean, it's probably the same impulse as pushing the red button just to see what happens. I mean, everyone has the human impulse to break and scream and cry, even in small ways. You'll see like the most innocent person will like step on ice to watch it break. And like that's coming from the exact same soul impulse that
Yep.
my love for horror comes from, I think. And so, um, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, so I'm rewatching the TV show Penny Dreadful right now,
Oh, I've never seen it. I hear
and
great things.
especially if you like those classic monsters, like the
Mhm.
Universal monsters, like it's literally got Victor Frankenstein and his monster. It's
I
got
know.
a werewolf. It's got, fucking vampires. It's got Mina from Dracula. Like it just piles it all in. It's got so much. It's got Dorian Gray.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
that's right. Yeah.
and so, but the thing that I love about it is like they are quote monsters.
Mhm.
Like that's how they're kind of presented in general terms, but they are monstrous. And like, so like the people that we are seeing as like the main cast of characters, very not good people in a lot of ways. But you have to watch their very legitimate, emotional, personal journey, and you get invested in their feelings and their lives and their ups and downs
Mhm.
in a way where you're like, I know I'm with a monster, but that monster is hurting right now, and that's making me
Mhm.
feel a certain way. And so I think that's kind of like the power. By the way, it's just a fucking phenomenal show.
Mhm.
Um, and I think it's like 30 something episodes, so it's not huge.
Okay.
Um, so that's my little plug for anybody listening. If you didn't watch it when it first came out, which I was watching it every week when it came out, and I was just like ravenous about it.
Oh man.
It's such a good show, and like it shows you the depth of like we all feel, even if we are awful,
Mm.
we all feel, and so that's kind of like what I like about that show.
Yeah.
But like what you were talking about kind of made me feel like that. I think that at a certain point we all kind of feel we're our worst kind of critics in a way, but like we all kind of feel monstrous a little bit. Like
Mm.
I'm
Mhm.
not a good person, or I could be a better person, or the way I look, or the way that I whatever it is.
Yeah.
Like we all feel that there's something ugly about us,
Mhm.
and so when we see those things, maybe it's like our way of indulging in like watching something that we identify with, even though maybe we don't want to or something.
Yeah.
Kind of got lost in my idea, but like I feel like there's
No.
something to that where it's like we're identifying with the monstrousness of ourselves that we maybe don't want to think about or talk about when we look at this. That could be something that's going on.
I think yeah, and I think that's especially true for Frankenstein-esque creatures. Not just Frankenstein's monster specifically, but anyone that kind of falls into that, um,
Oh
sort
my
of
god, did
trope.
you read Iron Hollow?
No, I hear that's a really great one as well.
Sorry, I totally derailed that thought you were having, but like fucking oh my god. So I'm
Okay.
sorry, continue.
All right. But no, that's great. So yeah, like whatever kind of tropey monster you're kind of attracted to or drawn to, at any particular moment, like I think that speaks to. I think you're exactly right that there's a dark mirror happening there, and like I've thought a lot about
Yeah.
the like my big entree into horror. Was the Saw franchise.
Wow.
I those were
Start big, buddy.
yeah those were some of the first movies that I downloaded and had on my laptop and watched secretly in my room in high school. when I was like 14, 15. Um, and I think what really drew me to that world was that Jigsaw is this kind of like broken down. His body is useless. He's riddled with cancer, and he's just taking out his anger and frustration on anyone else. Like he's rigging up all these games that also kind of inspire you to have a relationship with your body, which I think is why a lot of teens
Mhm.
are drawn to movies like that, because it kind of in a time when you're um, experience or like fostering this new relationship with your body, like, oh, my body can do this, or oh my god, my body is doing this thing. And this is a similar thought to like, could I twist my arm that way to like get out of this thing? um, you
Yeah.
know
Yep.
and even now, like, as you continue to get older and your body does different things, then I'm like,
Oh.
now that I'm in my 30s, I'm like, oh, well, could I do this? How much blood could I
Yeah.
lose? And so I think just that, like, as a kid in high school who was kind of overweight and like, felt like my own body was kind of useless and whatever, didn't like the way I looked, that whole experience of those films, I think, really spoke to me. Um,
Huh.
so I think there's something in all of those kinds of experiences that reflects something in us, and no matter what it is. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like exhausted by my own thought.
No, like, but
I, like said that, I'm like,
that
ugh.
and that makes me want to reflect on like the horror I am drawn to, and like what of me is drawing me in, possibly. Sometimes maybe we just want to just have fun. Totally,
Totally.
absolutely,
Yeah.
that's going to be part of it. But like sometimes maybe that is speaking to us about something. Um, like even if so, like Hannibal, I love the Hannibal TV series,
Oh yeah.
and like that. This clock is like a reference to one of the episodes in Hannibal.
Okay.
Um, but I think for me that is like oh, I had a thought and I lost it when I mentioned the clock. But like,
I can't see it well enough either to be like, I have to take your word for it on what
yeah,
reference it is, because I'm like, oh sure,
it's kind
it's
of
like,
it's vague. But
okay.
do you remember when? Did you watch the series?
I watched parts of it. I'm a huge fan of the
Okay,
books, but I haven't seen all of the
okay.
show.
The show is. I'm not just saying this because like my bucket list guest is Brian Fuller. The show is un unbeatable. It's so good. But I think that one of the things about Hannibal that I'm really drawn to is like Hannibal is his name is the name of the show, but he's like kind of the bad guy, but
Mhm.
like we're really there to watch him. And the thing about it is like we have to struggle with he has obviously some really bad thoughts and he does some really bad things, but we have to struggle with like, is he right? And
Mhm.
so like for me, when I have thoughts and I'm like, ooh, that's dark, or like that's weird, or that's outside. If I have a weird dream that freaks me out that I had that dream,
Mhm.
like knowing that like someone else is analyzing like what is beyond the pale and stuff like that
Mhm.
really kind of resonates with me. Like we all kind of go to dark places. Are we the Will Graham about it where we're like the good side of it?
Mm.
Or are we really the Hannibal about it where we're just like the embodiment of evil? So
Yeah, that's
I think that's
interesting.
what draws me to that.
Well, and you made a
Yeah.
strong argument for Penny Dreadful too, and I think that that is also another good litmus test. I think for people who are true horror fans or not, that I'll say things like, the Lawrence Renfield gets kicked in the head, and then that is sort of what drives him to kill his family, and that happens all the time. I mean, all the time people
Yeah.
turn on a dime,
Yeah.
and like something that fascinates me because it terrifies me is family annihilators. These like
Yeah.
family men who all of a sudden are like deep in debt or something, and they just murder their entire family. That is crazy to me. The idea that you could all of a sudden wake up and be someone different. Like, I have no intention of killing anybody. I never have. But what
Yeah.
if I woke up tomorrow and that was fucking different? And you say that to people, And some people are like, yeah, that's a scary thought. And then some people like giggle nervously and kind of back away. And I'm like, fuck you. Like this,
No.
like,
Yeah.
that's how can you not understand that feeling? How can you deny that you have never had a nightmare that fucked you up because it came from you? Or like, a weird thought of like, just like weird thoughts, like even like my poor pup. I'm like, I'm so powerful over you, like I have the power to like really hurt you, dude, and that scares me,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so that's a that's an idea that just really scares me. And then also I'll say, because I'm deep in Better Call Saul, which I've never seen before, but
I've not seen it, but
oh,
yeah.
so good. But I then rewatched Breaking Bad to kind of get in the zone for it, and I think that's part of what makes Breaking Bad so brilliantly tragic, is that it in the first couple seasons you do have sympathy for this guy because you see him kind of beaten
Yeah.
down. He wanted more from his life. It's that kind of classic like American male, like, I got the shitty house and the shitty job and the boring family. How
Yeah.
can I get more? Which fuels a lot of stories. That sort of Fight Club effect of like, don't you want more from your consumerist lifestyle? But then at a certain point that turns, and you as a viewer alongside Jesse Pinkman start to realize that he isn't sympathetic. His brain is breaking, and he's just a fucking psychopath and a total asshole and a murderer drunk on power. And by the end of the show, that's where he ends, so like,
Yeah.
spoilers
Yeah.
for Breaking Bad, I guess, but like, um that just is so brilliant on rewatch. So I don't know what,
Yeah.
like, my point is there exactly about like watching the monstrous thing, but like having sympathy for a monster and then having that
Yeah.
sympathy kind of retract.
Well, and that it lives in all of us. So like if you don't think so, you're lying to yourself. But like I had a dream in my teens. I'm 46 years old. I've literally never told anybody the dream I had because in my mind I'm like, that's the thing that proves that I'm an insane person. It was so
Sure, yeah.
fucked up that I was like, I can't believe my mind created the thing that happened.
Yeah.
And so like it scares me so much that like it's been probably 30 years that no one has ever heard this story,
Mm,
this dream of mine. But but that compels me to understand me, and that compels me to explore like what is monstrous and who's representing this and how does it look. And so
yeah.
like I think that's part of what drives me to understand or to like um look at horror is like what is evil, what is monstrous, what is
Mm,
scary, and like why, like the
mm,
why of it. So
yeah.
um yeah, that's a big thing. um just want to pivot back to a couple of like specific observations I made about stories that I thought were cool. I know we haven't talked about all of them. We've talked about a good amount of the stories, at least to a degree. But the My Name is Ellie
Mm,
story, the thing I thought was interesting about that, and I feel like you've talked about this somewhere else, I just don't remember exactly what you said, was like how the story was telling was interesting because like a lot of the sentences start with the word witch, like
mm, mhm.
WHICH. So like there's a specific storytelling approach that you took where it was like which then this, which then this, and so I thought it was very interesting that that was like a specific choice you made. So do you have a quick thought on that?
Yeah, I don't remember why, but I wanted to. Well, I don't. I'll say I don't remember why specifically, but I have always been fascinated by playing with structure and form, and
Hmm.
I would love to do more stories where I'm really technical with it. Like in an early draft of Edenville, the two main characters, Cam and Quinn, are trapped in this kind of codependent relationship, and um, So to show that they are not together emotionally, I wanted them to never be mentioned in the same paragraph together. Um, that quickly was like so hard. um, but so like technical things like that. So um, I think it just like struck me to like have every sentence in a story structured the same way. So I think also like I was reading a lot of like experimental stuff at the time, like Stephen Dunn. His book Potted Meat is a really cool sort of experimentally thing,
Mhm.
and some like experimental memoirs, like what is her name? Karen Green. Bow Down, like bow is in the tree. She has a book
Mhm.
of it's like a memoir poetry book about because she was married to David Foster Wallace, and so after he killed himself,
Oh, okay.
it's like her reaction to that. And then Edouard Levy is the other one that I can think of, where he has what is it called? Again, I'm like squinting at my shelf. But he has one called like self portrait or auto portrait or something, where it's not it has no plot or anything. It's just like 100 pages of declarative statements. I am this. I have never done this. So I've just always been really fascinated by that, like really nitty gritty technical stuff. And so I don't remember why
Mhm.
exactly I was like, I'm gonna do every sentence starting with which is, but that was kind of the technical exercise of that one. And sort of the only story in the book that I had that kind of technical exercise with. So
Mhm.
yeah, kind of a fun one.
Yeah, no, I thought it was cool, and I was like, um, and it's the second story, so like it sets you up to be like, hey, it looks like it looks like there's a lot of possibilities with this collection. So
Mm.
I think I don't know if it's intentional to put it so early in the book, but like, and then it was followed up by another one that I want to talk about, Detour, which
Uh,
probably is my second favorite story
okay,
because it's
nice.
just like, um, here's the thing, it's written in the second person, right?
Hmm.
Am I right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
sorry.
Good.
I was just
Just want
nodding
because
and
I'm
listening.
panicking over
So I was like
here.
just
So
excited to be here for a second.
it's written in the second person, and it's a person who's coming home from like their like AA kind of meeting or
Hmm.
whatever, and they get detoured off of the main road onto a side road, but in a suspicious way where it's like, I don't know how legit this seems, but this
Mm.
is what we're doing. um, and the whole thing's written in second person, and the reveal of why it's written in second person, it happens way late in the story.
Mm.
And so it's like I didn't know who was telling me the story the whole time. I just assumed that's just how the story is being told. But then there's a reason, and the fact that you find out the reason later on, I thought was very effective. Um, but second person is always a little bit. Not a lot of people go down that road,
Yeah.
but when it's done well, it's done effective. So Stephen Graham Jones wrote a book called Not for Nothing,
Mm.
all in second person, and it's a great book.
Mm.
But he's also Stephen Graham Jones, so
Yeah.
but like not a lot of people approach that, but I feel like it's very effective when it is used properly, and I feel like this is a really good example of why second person could be an effective
Oh,
thing.
thanks.
And so I really love, I guess I just, even if you don't have a comment on it, I'm commending you on your execution of using that.
Well, that one was a real struggle because I feel like there's a period of time when I was just writing down images that I saw on drives. My first pro sale was of a short story called Black Fang Thing in Shimmer magazine back in the day, and that was also like I was driving through this town, and there was one road where everyone was out on their porch like looking up at the sky, and so as I was driving I was like, what the fuck is everyone looking at? And couldn't tell. And so that sparked a story. Driving by the bathtub on the side of the road sparked the story. And then I was thrown down this detour, which like I have a bad sense of direction, and if I'm not on a road where I know the road like intimately, even after living in the Hudson Valley for 20 years, I'm still like, I got to pull up the GPS, I got to whatever. And so
Yeah.
that before, I had the GPS like on my car, with my fancy 2017 Honda CRV or whatever. Like, it was just like I would kind of have my phone in the cup holder and hope that Google Maps would work. And um,
Yeah.
so that was the seed of Detour, was being on that detour and really being scared for like 20 minutes, just being like, what the fuck? Um, and it went through so many different versions. There was a version where he like picks up this woman and she turns into a witch, or like he drives to this church and there's like a pile of other cars that they've scrapped and they're burning in a giant pile in front of the church. Like there were just so many different versions of this story. Um, and I think I hit a point where, I've had a lot of stories like this where I've had a lot of versions of it. And then I just hit a point where I'm like, fuck it. I just want the audience or the reader to know this. And so I just hit a point
Yeah.
where I was like, you're driving down a road, and
Right.
that's, I think, when a lot of stories hit the ground running, because you've done all this, like, the iceberg of background work where you're like trying to explain it to yourself and trying to explain it to yourself. Then finally you're like, I just want them to understand this. And so, like, even the story I'm working on now, I was like doing pages of exposition and I was like, they're here. Just the scene is this, and so
I
that
love it.
detour was kind of that point. And so I think that's what it was, that I was like, just imagine that you're driving at night, and so I don't remember exactly how that shift happened, but I think it was like frustration at myself.
Well, I think it works very effectively.
Well, thank you,
So
man. I'm super glad
I'm
that.
glad you got there.
Yeah. Oof, Jesus. Yeah.
And then, kind of finally, just the interstitials or whatever you want to call them, like
Hmm.
the pieces that are in between stories, where it's like a sister emailing her brother to kind of like tell him, "Hey, I've kind of gone down this rabbit hole about this place that we grew up in or lived in or whatever," um, and that kind of feeding into the thing I liked about that was like that could be connective tissue, or that could give the reader um, not prompts, but like that could explain things without necessarily explaining it, but it like gave you, it was like the backbone of the collection together, where it's like
Mm.
you're learning kind of the sequential uh, facts of the story, of a bigger story, and getting these little like pieces in between, and like it kind of provided a foundational feeling to these kind of disparate pieces,
Hmm.
which I thought was great. Was it always intended that that would lead into a follow up story?
Yeah, that's a good question. Uh, the stain was one that I started with just the sort of situational stuff, and sort of the imagery of the blood leaking into this spoiled earth,
Mm.
and like finger gunned, for listeners at home. uh, but that and what was really informative for that one was Hemingway's book In Our Time, because he has these like weird interstitial chapters, he calls them, in between all the short stories in that book. um,
Mm.
and I realized that this is kind of a random reading list, from like French experimental like, bullshit to like Hemingway to Priya Sharma. It was all stuff that I was reading during my MFA, because this was really my MFA thesis, and so this came out of
Gotcha.
very literary period, and then Edenville came out of a period when I was just smoking a lot of pot. So it's like
Fair enough.
different vibes, but uh, for in our time, he it's interesting because he presents this landscape of images that are the time. The title only makes sense if you're looking at like the those interstitials themselves and starting to piece together, like, because they don't connect to each other really. They don't connect to the stories that are in between them. There are small connections, like that character Nick Adams, he has show up in a couple different stories. But I was just fascinated. I was like, well, what does it mean? Why is he doing this then? Because the other stories or the other collections I'd experienced before then made so much more sense. Like um, all
Mm.
of Bradbury's stuff have clear, like even the Illustrated Man has a very clear interstitial bit between the first couple stories that show you what you're doing here. Um, or like, that even makes me think of the Twilight Zone, like Rod Serling. The whole bit of that show was that he's guiding you through these stories. And
Yeah.
so I was like, how is Hemingway guiding us through these things? And so really sat down and mapped it out, and figured out like where were the more objective third person passages? Where does he bring in the first person voice? Where does it turn? Which sections are about character versus like the landscape? And so started to map that onto the story that I had of the stain and think about that as a framework for all these other stories that I had. Um,
Yeah.
and then at a certain point had to flip it on its head because then I was starting with this kind of detached, characterless thing. And it didn't make sense to any of my advisors or beta readers. They were like, who's talking? Why do we care about them? And so now it starts right away with the character and what's at stake for her, right? The very first couple of lines
Yeah.
are her being like, I'm trying to make amends. I'm sorry that I have been distant. Um, and it's important that we stick together, especially because we live in a spooky place. So and then the landscape blooms out from there. So yeah, that was also kind of a long process of piecing together how it worked and how the character fit into it, and stuff like that. And I'm realizing now too that I meant to say, because you were saying something earlier about how we all feel monstrous and we all feel
Yeah.
like, um, I forget the exact words that you used, but like we all feel, poorly made in some way, and so that's
Yeah.
really where the title comes from. That it's all these
Yeah.
characters who feel like they have these things that make them poorly made, and how they succumb to those things or grapple with them or whatever. So yeah,
I love it. Yeah. No, I
yeah.
love that. That's great. To lead things out, I would just like to know, I don't know how much you've been talking about it, but like, because Galloway's gospel has connective tissue and is can heavily connected to the other two books. What can you or what are you able to say about it, or what's your kind of like thing that you're talking about it so far?
Well, I think I can talk about it pretty freely because the description's already up on Amazon, which I feel like means I'm good to go. um,
Yeah. Oh, and
but
it's silly me too. It's coming out later this year, right? Like in September or something. So
September,
it's
yeah, it's like
yeah. So I guess you could pretty much you're in full promo mode by now.
yeah. I'm going to talk about it too much, even, but no. It is a continuation of Rachel Durwood's story. So Rachel Durwood is our hero in The Poorly Made, who's sending these emails. And in by the time we meet up with her again in Galloway's Gospel, she's joined up with the Renfield County Guard, and they're kind of a Men in Black organization who are, fighting all the evil and weird shit in Renfield County. So she's like kind of a superhero badass in this one. I love her a lot, which is kind of cool because, like I said before, Poorly Made came out of a like depressed period of my life, and to see her like rise up and become a superhero makes me kind of like fuck yeah. She, um, has a colleague, another member of the Renfield County Guard, go missing around the town of Burnskid, which has been sort of cut off from the county for the last 10 years. And so Rachel Durwood is kind of like, well, clearly something is happening in Burnskid. We got to go figure it out. And she gets this weird message, that some cult has taken over Burnskid. And she's like, well, um, gotta go figure it out. um, and so we're cutting between her storyline and 10 years prior, where we meet a different Rachel Galloway, and she's bored in class at Burnskid High School. And she is drawing these little monsters in her notebook, and her classmates are like, um, think that these monsters are real. And she's like, no, I just made them up. And her classmates are like, I don't know. We live in Renfield County. Did you make them up? Maybe you're having visions. Maybe these monsters are trying to speak to you, and blah, blah, blah. And before she knows it, like, um, this whole town is being taken over by this cult that's like started by this imaginary silly thing, and she can't stop it. And so those are our two storylines between these two Rachels, as one is sort of losing control of her own narrative, and the other is trying to dig in and find out what happened 10 years ago. And so it turned out to be a more timely book than I kind of intended it to be, because it's all about how men twist stories for their own purposes and gobble up as much power as they can, while ostensibly saying that it's for religious purposes or whatever.
Yeah.
Because I don't buy any of this like pseudo Christian bullshit about like, well, God says that you shouldn't have abortions or whatever. Like, come on. But it just faith as a means of control, and cults, and of course there's weird monsters and all kinds of fun stuff. So it's going to be a really fun, epic time. Galloway's Gospel, September 16th, bookstores near you.
I feel like there's a lot of good stuff coming out in September.
Yeah, what was I just hearing about?
And of course, my mind is blank on what specifically, but
Clay's collection comes out in September.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Rachel Harrison usually has a book out in the fall, so maybe she's in that timeline too.
Yeah, Play Nice is her new one, I think.
Yeah, I'm excited about that.
Yeah.
Rachel Can't Myth, though, I know that we're wrapping up, but I will say, if you haven't read that Punk Goes Horror short story collection, she's got a story she finishes out the collection, and it's a side of Rachel I have not read from her novels, where I was like, oh shit. So like I've read like 3 or 4 of her novels, and I'm like, she is objectively a good writer, but what she did in that short story made me be like, oh, she's doing way more to me than I realized, and I really get the talent. Maybe I was like, she's one of the, like, she makes it look effortless, kind of.
Yeah.
Like, like you see a guitarist and they're just like look bored, but they're doing the most complicated thing. I feel like there's more of that to Rachel than I realized. So I'm so on board for whatever she does.
That's how I felt about So Thirsty, because I was really impressed by Black Sheep, and I was like, well, this is my favorite of hers now. And now I'm in So Thirsty, and I'm like, oh shit, maybe this is my favorite of hers now. It just feels so good. And I love that, like, she's playing into tropes so heavily. Like in So Thirsty, they walk into the most vampire nest. Like it's so odd. Like they walk into like a vampire orgy,
Yeah, and it's a caricature. It's a it's a parody, but it's also serious. Totally.
So good. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, man. This was so much fun.
I'm so glad I got to talk to you about The Poorly Made, and I'm very much looking forward to Galloway's Gospel now. But I will say, if anybody who's listening or watching, pick up both books. As Sam told you, you can read them in any order you want to. But like, there's a lot of, and the thing I didn't mention, like it gets real freaky. Like there is some horror in these books. So like, or in the book that I read. So in an impressive way. So like, it's not, he goes there, and it's great. So I definitely recommend you this book. So Sam,
thanks, man.
Thank you so much for your time. I know I took more time than than we wanted
Oh,
to. But
it's all
it
good.
was a great conversation. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. No, this was great. I was trying to log off at a certain time so I could kind of let my dog out and take care of him, but he's asleep and has been for an hour, so he's fine. It's like,
Nice,
yeah.
awesome.
But no, thank you so much, man. I hope you have a great night. Thank you again for chatting and for being so enthusiastic about the Poorly Made. That is really, really sweet to hear people connecting with this one so much. So thank you.